and welcome to Sonic Talk number 249. This is a special edition in which we're not actually live today, but we have this pre-recorded interview that I'm about to do with composer Mike Leghorn, or arranger. Mike, you are, whereabouts are you based? You're in the States, right? So this is very early in the morning for you.
Yeah, it is very early. The sun hasn't quite come up. I'm in the Chicago area.
Ah, okay.
States.
So I just want to say now, I mean, the reason we're talking to Mike is because you may have seen there's been a couple of links on Synthtopia and various other places just sort of showing that Mike has been working on an arrangement of Holst's The Planet, and it's actually really very impressive body of work so far. So far you've done Mars, Mercury and Jupiter, right? That's I wanted to know, I mean, what sort of inspired you to do this?
Well, I first started with Mercury as an experiment, not really thinking that I was going to do all of the planets. And, I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. It was just an experiment. And after working on it for a couple of hours, I was surprised at how good it sounded. And I just plowed through Mercury. I selected Mercury because that was the simplest of the planets. And I plowed through that. I finished it in a week. I mean, I was just so motivated and so inspired by it. It just sounded so cool to me. And I thought, well, maybe I can do some more. And I sent a friend a link to the music, and he said, please do the rest of them. So I said, okay, I'll try to do the rest. So,
well, let's have a little. Do you mind if I play a small clip of Mercury just to kind of give listeners who perhaps aren't familiar with this a brief? Okay, let me just. So this is. Right, so I'm hearing that's a fairly complex a fairly complex movement. I mean, the thing about this Holst, the whole Holst suite of planets is most people, if they have not heard it before, when they hear it for the first time, they realise that there are a whole bunch of classical themes in there that they perhaps have heard somewhere else. I mean, and it's very borrowed, isn't it, as a piece? But what I was going to ask you really was, what approach did you take? Because I mean, classical. Did you start from scratch? Did you have a score? I mean, how did you kind of begin?
Okay, well, a lot of the work was already done for me. I downloaded the MIDI file. It's pretty easy to find MIDI versions of all of the Holst planets. So that's what I started with. Saved me a lot of work.
Right, I can imagine that must have been an immense relief when you discovered those. How did you choose the right MIDI version? Because I mean, the thing that strikes me about all of this classical stuff is there's lots of movement in tempo and time signature changes and all of that. I mean, how did that work within the context of a MIDI file?
Well, the ideal MIDI file for me is one that doesn't have doesn't have any nuances in it. All I want are the notes. I don't want tempo changes. I don't want, I want the notes to be quantized so that if you were to actually look at the MIDI in let's say a staff view, it would look okay. So actually, musically, the MIDI file is very lacking. It doesn't have any of the nuances and any of the phrasing or articulation. So all I want are the notes.
And then what's the next part of the process? I mean, what do you do then? I mean, do you add that kind of dynamic to it? Because I mean, the thing that I noticed about these recordings is, just looking at the waveform on SoundCloud, they're not toothpaste. You know, they are dynamic and living kind of waveforms. There's a lot of movement and stuff in there. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, that absolutely is my goal. I want it to be sound like a living piece. And that's the challenge. And so first, I start with I have a very nice DAW, digital audio workstation, which is Sonar X1.
Mm-hmm.
So I import the MIDI into that, and it's very important to keep the project simple by so I create a couple of views that I use over and over again.
Are they like
And,
templates essentially?
yeah, right. In Sonar, they're called screen sets. This is the MIDI, and I mean, look at this. I mean, it just looks like a mess. I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot of MIDI in there.
pretty cool looking. Um, so this is all of Jupiter right here.
Whoa.
That's and so this
It
is
looks like a
really
spectrograph now. It's amazing.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Awesome. So where do these MIDI files originate from?
I have a website. I mean, there's a website I go to. I think it's called classicalarchives.com.
Uh-huh.
And they have a huge collection of MIDI files.
Wow. So somebody has put all of that stuff in. That's incredible, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a community thing. You know, people can contribute MIDI. And there's no guarantee of quality. In fact, on this MIDI, I mean, although I'm extremely appreciative that I was able to get a MIDI file, I had to make quite a few corrections to it.
Right. Okay. And how do those corrections? Do you have to refer to an original score to sort of check? Do you double check it against a score, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's sort of a combination of having the score and then also having a good pair of ears.
Right.
So initially, in the project, you'll see all the MIDI. The MIDI is there, but synth tracks will be empty, and then it's just a matter of copying parts of the MIDI track, parts of the MIDI track over to a synth track.
So how do you know which notes are the right lines within the arrangement? Obviously, if you're dealing with one big MIDI file, are they all on separate MIDI channels? And so you can say, well, this is this line, this is this line, these are the sort of
Right.
lower stretch. How does that all work?
Yeah, well, thankfully, the MIDI file already has the parts defined in separate tracks. And then I rely very heavily on my ear
Right.
to know what, and it's actually it's just a matter of constant trial and error to hack at it until I get it the way I like it.
So tell me a little bit about your background then. I mean, are you classically trained? I mean, do you have a musical background? I mean, it sounds like you understand the mechanics of this at the very least.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm familiar with the planets. I've listened to the planets over 1,000 times, probably, the orchestral version since I was a teenager. I've had several different recordings of it. And I do have a classical background. That's really my my emphasis. That's my foundation is classical.
What do you play? Are you a pianist or a string? What's
Yeah,
your
I do play the piano, and I've also played the violin.
Right. Okay. So you have an understanding of how those work in a score way. I mean, I have none personally. I don't. It's complete mystery to me. So once you've kind of got this stuff in your DAW, Sonar X1, as you say, are you then adding the fluidity to it then, or do you try and keep it all absolutely locked? I mean, because that.
I don't have like a recipe, a strict method for it. I kind of work on it as I go. So, like I might do, let's say, 10 measures on a night, and first copy over the MIDI to the synth tracks that I like, do a lot of experimenting, and then I'll use volume envelopes on the synth tracks to start getting the phrasing and articulation and to make it sound more musical. Because the thing is, as I work on this, it has to sound good to me.
Yeah.
If it doesn't sound good, I lose my inspiration. So as I'm working on it, I try to make it sound as good as I can. And then, towards the end of towards finishing the project, I'll put in some final touch-ups.
Interesting. And so what do you reach for first of all when you say for instance with Mars, when you start? If I could, maybe I could play a little bit of Mars, because that's got a very atmospheric beginning. Are you hearing this, by the way, coming back?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay, cool. That's great. That's so filmic. It's just, I mean, that must have been a great one to start with. So where did you start there? I'm guessing, you wanted the sort of darkness. How did you begin with that one, say?
I had a lot of trial and error. I trashed my work on that many times before I finally settled on what you hear now. The goal is for me is to add value to what's already a fantastic orchestration by Holst. And so probably 5 or 6 times working on the beginning of Mars, I realized, this is not adding value. So I went several different routes. So I guess the short answer is a lot of trial and error.
But what's the instrumentation that we're hearing there to begin with? I mean, you say you use you're using software instruments primarily, is that right?
Yeah, right. And I made a rule for myself: only synthesized sounds, no samples.
Oh, really? Because it sounded to me in some places like that are actually orchestra. There is orchestra stuff, but so you've designed all of those. Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, that's a hard, fast rule for me. No samples. I mean, once you use samples, you're getting into the realm of an orchestra, and an orchestra can do its thing much better than any samples can do.
Yeah, I would agree. So tell me, I want you to tell me what instruments you use.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Let's hear it.
To tell you. Yeah. I'm using 4 synthesizers.
Yeah.
Zebra, Ace, and Tyrell. Those 3 are by Urs Heckman.
Right, that makes a lot of sense, because I heard that and I thought it sounded very filmic. And we've actually done an interview with the sound designer who came up with a lot of stuff for those synthesizers, who worked with Hans Zimmer on some soundtracks called Howard Scar, and he designed a lot of patches for it, and he swears by it, and I know Hans Zimmer absolutely loves it. And the opening of that just sounded so filmic to me, and I just thought that doesn't, so it doesn't surprise me, I guess. And does it?
Yeah, actually, probably about a third of the sounds I use are designed by Howard Scar.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, he's my favorite sound designer.
I'm sure he will be very pleased. He's a regular listener and live to the podcast. We often see him in the chat room, so I'm sure he'll be beaming with pride, I hope, if he gets to hear this. Interesting. And do you spend a lot of time working on the actual sound design, or you start with Howard's stuff, or?
No, I'm not too good at sound design.
You just know what you want to hear, and you pick the right. Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Yeah, I do some tweaking. I'll tweak the ADSR envelopes, and then also sometimes portamento, just so it flows right. But and then also one of the first things I do when I tweak a sound is remove the delay.
Right. So do you take the effects off and then reconstruct that in the mix portion of what you're doing, or is that how you tend to work?
Yes. I try to minimize the use of effects and then only add them very judiciously.
Because the one thing I hear, you're using the sort of width and the sonic characteristics, certainly the beginning of that piece of Mars, to create the sense of space. But there are other elements which you can hear that there's reverberation and stuff that creates additional space and atmosphere around it.
Right. Right. I should tell you, I'm also using some other effects processors, especially in the beginning there. I do use Amplitude by...
IK Multimedia.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And then later on in a couple other places in the piece, I use granular effect, which is called Ubic G, also by Heckman.
It sounds like you're very much tuned into what Urs Heckman comes out. It sounds like he's making instruments that are ideally suited to you. So I'm sure he's going to be very pleased to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the start of my whole palette is his suite of products, and then if I need more, then I'll go look for more.
Interesting. So, I mean, you're in pretty good company when it comes to these kind of orchestrations of Holst of Holst pieces. I mean, obviously, I was listening to the Isotometer, and there was another guy called Ed Starink who I'd never heard of before. And when I was on YouTube, just kind of researching for this interview, and they were really interesting as well. But yours, the thing that I found is the Isotometer stuff, which is, they are classic recordings. They're still they're a bit sort of comical in some places and cheesy. Some of the synthesizer stuff that he uses is kind of, I don't know if it's supposed to be funny, but it sort of sounds like it's like the Funky Worm, But whereas yours is a bit more sort of dark and atmospheric. I mean, did you have a philosophical approach to that when you were doing it, or is it just the way that it's come out because that's the way what you like as your ear?
Well, I think a little bit of both. Well, for one thing, each of the 7 planets is unique. So each one requires a different approach. At least that's how I'm approaching it. Mars is very, very serious and very gnarly. There's not much humor in Mars. Nasty, mean piece. So that's what I went for. Now with Jupiter, I think there's a lot of humor that I captured in Jupiter. So each of these pieces, I'm taking a different approach, but definitely different from all.
So are you familiar with? I mean, I noticed that you're actually part of when I first went looking for you. Apart from the fact that we can find you on MikeLeghorn.com. I just want to give you a plug there, Mike-Leghorn.com. There's also a place which is, let me see, it's Classitronic, and there's a lot of composers listed there. And a lot of what they do is very much in homage or in the style of some of the people who've gone before, such as Tomita and Gleason and that kind of side of things. Whereas you've gone your own way more so. So is that something that's been something that you've wanted to do specifically to make it your very own rather than kind of imitative?
Yeah, maybe not intentionally. I think a lot of the uniqueness that you hear is the result of my unique approach and my unique experience in learning software synthesizers. So it's sort of a culmination of my experience with software synthesizers. Just over the last few years, I've spent a lot of time just dabbling with the various software synthesizers, especially Zebra and Ace, and exploring sounds that I really like. And my ear has developed through the use of those sounds. And so the result with these arrangements is how I hear it in my head.
No, that's the way. I mean, and I'm glad you do, because one thing that I did notice, a lot of the people listed on Classitronic there's a lot of pictures of them stood in front of large modular synthesizers, but very little examples of their actual work, which is something. It's quite funny because it's so true to type. People with modular synthesizers generally don't get much done because you sort of start and you get lost, and then you just kind of come back and you've actually done nothing at all. Whereas your work rate is actually pretty prolific by comparison. How long does it take you to kind of do each of these pieces? Do you approach it in a methodic way, or do you just kind of do it when you feel like it? Do you set yourself a deadline? How do you do that?
With my hectic lifestyle, I have to do it when I feel like it. And some take longer than others. Like I said, Mercury took me a week, but Mars took about 2 months, and Jupiter took about a month and a half.
Is that because Mars has more atmosphere, whereas some of the other ones, they are complex, but they're still it's more about just sort of getting the notes in, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. Mars is a completely different animal compared to Mercury. And yes, there's a lot of atmosphere, and there's also just a lot of notes. I mean, if you look at the score of Mars, there's just so much more going on than there is in Mercury.
So I noticed that. So how do you kind of bring it all together? Do you mix inside the box, or are you kind of got any? Do you have it hardware? What is your technical setup? I guess you working on Sonar,
Okay.
so I'm guessing you're working on PC, right?
Yeah, that's right. I have a very clean, streamlined setup, I guess you would say. There's nothing analog. I have a laptop,
Right.
Which is not ideal. I mean, it would be nice to have a really big monitor, high-res monitor. And I have a MIDI keyboard. I can hold it up right here.
Oh, let's see.
This is your
Yep, little Axiom.
very popular.
Yep.
The Axiom 49 key. Another thing that, I should say right off, a very high priority for me is the quality of my sound system. So I also have top of the line Sennheiser headphones,
Right.
the HD800 headphones. Some people say they're the best headphones in the world. And then I also have a very high quality headphone amp, which has a DAC built into it.
So do you come digitally out of your laptop into the DAC so that you don't lose
That's
any?
right.
Right.
Right. I have a USB connection, in the headphone amp. So I can just do USB out from the computer to the headphone amp.
Okay. What is that? What make is it?
The headphone amp, it's Headroom. It's the Headroom desktop amp. It's made here in America.
Right. And do you find that makes an enormous difference to how you hear it all? Because I mean, certainly with dance music production or other forms of music, the kind of instinct is just to keep turning it up till it feels good. How do you mix? Do you mix at kind of low levels? I mean, do you vary your level? Because mixing on headphones is a very different experience to using speakers. Although I do see you have a fairly large speaker close to your head there as well.
For me, headphones are much better for monitoring my music than speakers. There's something about just getting closer to the music with headphones where I can hear the details a lot better. As far as monitoring volume, I just go by the meters in my DAW. I want the music to be, especially since it's the whole planets, I want it to be as dynamic as possible. So I'm constantly trying to leave myself enough headroom to accommodate the loudest parts.
That's an interest. That's interesting. So, do you find that you get some way through a piece and then think I've got to scale everything back to meet that? Because I mean, mixing in the box, everybody says it's all about headroom and how much you leave to let the maths do its work properly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's sort of a continuous process for me. By the time I'm finished with the project, I pretty much have a maximum peak around like -1, just below
Wow,
0.
I'm really impressed by your discipline actually, because that's many people just drive the 2 bus or whatever bus. I mean, do you use any dynamic compression in there as well, just to sort of bring the floor up?
Yes, actually, I kind of discovered that late in this project, and I do apply that as a final touch after I've finished everything.
Right, so it's on the mastering positions, at the mastering
Right.
point of mastering. Because I mean, look again, looking at the waveform, you're very restrained on that. I mean, that is dynamic, but it's also the main body of it is there's plenty of level there as well. So it's kind of it's good to see. So what do you mix down to? What's your kind of what resolution are you working at?
Well, I'm not too technical, but I think I can answer your question. I'm using 44.1 kilohertz, and let's see, I believe it's 24-bit.
Right. Okay.
That's what I work with all throughout. But then the final cut that it's a wave file at 16-bit.
16. Okay. So the other thing I was interested in is, because some of these are incredibly complex arrangements, are you able to run the whole thing in live, as it were, or do you have to bounce and freeze and what have you?
Yeah. I don't have just one project. What I find works really well for me is I'll have one final project. It's a master project, which has various audio clips exported from all my other projects. So Mars is broken down into about 6 or 8 different projects.
Right.
One project will be for like measures 1 through 20, and then the next one.
Okay. So movements and within those, are you able to run that in its entirety? Because I'm guessing each movement has its own set of instrumentation, doesn't it? So I suppose.
That's right. So for a span of 20 measures, I might use 30 or 40 different instances of software synthesizers.
And that runs okay live. I mean, you're able to.
Yeah.
Wow,
right.
that's pretty impressive. Is that a testament to Sonar or just the power of your PC?
It's hard to say. I don't think it's more of the power of my PC. I have a Pentium i5, which is not the fastest you can get. But,
Well, that's impressive that it works on an i5 well. How do you get the idea of that whole picture of the arrangement then? If you're working in separate bits, do you have to then automate? Yeah. You automate the sections to create the overall dynamic?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, since Mars is broken down into like 6 or 8 audio clips, when I bring those audio clips into the master file, I have the flexibility to adjust the levels of each audio clip, and then also, I can slide them around a little bit, but just so that they fuse, that they transition well and fuse seamlessly.
So we're looking at a master document here, right?
Yeah.
So it looks actually very much like a mastering session. So you have various different segments, like you said earlier, and they what's with the overlapping? Because do they actually need to be overlapped, or is that just tails and lead-ins that you've got?
Well, it depends on how you want to do it. Sometimes it's actually helpful to overlap them, and it actually makes your job a little bit simpler. For example, in this case, if you look at these 2 clips here, this one and this one, they overlap. And the reason they overlap is for the first clip, I did measures 1 through 19. You see the name of the clip. It says Mars 1 through 19.
Right.
And then the second clip, I did measures 14 through 45. But as far as 1 through 19 goes, it logically continues. I had to finish the phrasing of the parts that were included in this clip.
Right, and in the tail and what have you. Yeah, I see.
So they'll continue all the way through measure 19.
So that document there, is that a master tempo grid, or you just line it up to get it kind of feeling right so that they overlap nicely? Because if there's any tempo changes in the individual clips.
Yes. Well, in this case, I think they line up. Well, actually, no. It's not quantized. So if you shift them around.
Right. So you just kind of get them in the place that feels right.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Which is nice. I mean, you have a lot more flexibility that way, and you really hit it right on. If you have tempo changes, that can really screw things up.
That's interesting because, I mean, classical music generally, most tape, even if you go right back to the Deutsche Grammophon stuff, it's made up of lots and lots and lots of takes, expertly edited together by the editors at the mastering house, or by the overall producer of the record that says, yes, I want these bars from this one and this one, because there may be, I don't know, a dog barking or somebody sneezing in the audience, or somebody drops their violin case or whatever, you know. So I'm guessing in a lot of ways you are following the same kind of well-trodden path, but in a completely digital format.
Yeah, and I don't need to use scissors or tape.
No, thank goodness. Are you planning on tackling all of the planets, or are you kind of quit while you're ahead? I mean, what's your sort of? Do you want to finish the whole suite? Is that what you're hoping to do?
Yeah, I have to finish the whole suite. But generally, as a rule, a whole set is much better than just a few parts of it. So. I
had a sense that you might be a certain amount. There might be a certain amount of completist to your personality there. So I'm guessing that. So when do you think we'll see them? Have you fixed a sort of point on the horizon where you think I want it done by then?
Yeah, I think next April.
Okay. Next April, and what are you going to do with it? I mean, because it seems like there's an enormous amount of work. I mean, on SoundCloud, it's offering for free download, but it just seems like there must be other outlets available to you to allow you to, not necessarily monetize it, but keep, you might want to buy a new laptop so you can keep doing it. Do you know what I mean? It's less about making an income and, just to fund your habit, as it were.
Yeah, well, okay, what am I going to do with it? Well, first of all, I'm going to listen to it and enjoy it. But I would really like to sell it. I'm actually, I've reached out to a local label here. They're called Sadie Records, but they are known worldwide. That's spelled it's spelled Cedille.
Right.
It's a Chicago-based label, and but they actually distribute also through Naxos.
Ah, okay. They're a big distribution company.
Yeah, and the manager I spoke with, he said it's not out of the question. So I'm still in the running, and I just want, if he could just
hold on.
Yeah, if he would just listen to it, I think he would be really impressed. It's just hard to get anybody to actually put aside.
And also the thing is, you can do these things yourself now. I mean, the self-publishing. I mean, there's also this Google Music. There's all sorts of ways that you can get this out there, and it's just a question of doing a bit of publicity. I mean, hopefully this will help spread the word, and you'll get some more interest as well. But I mean, it's a fantastic project, and one that the thing about I used to listen to Holst in my 20s because it's kind of very accessible classical music, isn't it? It's got so many good tunes in it, and there's the I'm just trying to think. I think I might have a clip here. Is it? I might have to press this. I'm not sure what will happen if I press this. Let me see if I can. Let me just see.
Oh yeah.
Another great classical piece, and I think is it this one? There's one. Now this was also used by Frank Zappa, I believe, in a couple of his orchestral arrangements. So you're in very, very, very sort of high company there. But I must say, Mike, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really do appreciate you spending time with us. I know it's very early. I can see the light is beginning to stream through your windows there, and I can hear that your dogs are obviously keen to get some attention from you. But I want to say thank you very much for joining us, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck with finishing this project.
Well, thank you, Nick.